Welcome, everybody. If I can join Sam in welcoming you here today to ThoughtWorks Live 2013 and to our day talking about how you can thrive in a fragmented future. My name is Luke Barrett. I'm Managing Director for ThoughtWorks Europe. So I'm going to get us kicked off today. I'm going to talk a little bit about that theme and also preview some of the material that our other speakers are going to be talking about today. Okay, well, I think all of us today are probably here in a couple of capacities. One of those is that we are intimately involved in digital businesses. We create in one form or another offerings, services, products that people consume, whether that be end users, consumers, whether it be our colleagues or our partner organizations. But we also ourselves are consumers of these services and products. I don't know about you, I spend a fair amount of time traveling in my job, and that means I'm a kind of voracious consumer of content, whether that's RSS feeds or podcasts across a whole range of devices. So if I'm on a plane or a train, I've got my iPad, my iPhone. If I'm at home, I may be watching stuff on Apple TV or on my laptop. And as an end user, my expectation is that, do you know what, my experience is pretty seamless across those different channels. Not just to the extent that I don't expect to tell each device what feeds or podcasts I'm subscribed to, but to the point where if I'm listening to the podcast, to the audio or the video, on the train, and I pick that up later on the laptop at home, I expect it to remember, where I was and to go on from there. Now, I think many of us in the room have an appreciation of some of the complexities involved in providing that experience. As an end user, I don't care. That is now the way I'm coming to expect to consume services. And that's one example of the many facets, the many points of access we have as consumers, as users to products and services. And that, in turn, provides this challenge to us with our other hats on in terms of how do we provide those. And that's today. If we look to the not-so-distant future, a lot of fuss going on around things like Google Glasses. Okay, anyone in the room possess a pair of Google Glasses? No? Anyone's development department requisitioned budget to investigate the possibilities associated with? One, excellent. Two, so talk to those gentlemen about your privacy concerns later. So I think the jury is clearly out right now around what Google Glasses might mean for the future. Is it the Segway for the face? A clever, intriguing use of technology, but really struggling to understand who's going to use it and what the rate of adoption might be? Good engineering, interesting idea. Or is it literally going to change the way we perceive our environment and products and services? The jury's out. It's just one example of yet another kind of device, another channel for people to consume content. So we know that the technology landscape is changing. I think that's understood and accepted. And we know that because of that, it's driving organizations to work out how they respond. So it's causing business challenges. Historically, perhaps, we've seen some of these as something for the IT function, for the computer guys, for the developers to go solve. That's less and less the case. And as Jim Highsmith will be talking about later on today, certainly from a ThoughtWorks perspective, an agile, adaptive approach isn't just a strategy that you can take in the context of developing technology to support and products and services. It is an organizational strategy. And so as an organization, you need a holistic response to this opportunity, to this challenge. And interestingly, because to a certain extent this future is unwritten, there's a real opportunity for folks like us in the room to have a big say in how that future is shaped. And we'll come on to more of that later. Okay, just to kind of underline this with a few numbers. Horace, our next speaker, is going to be talking in more detail about what next for mobile. But just to give you a kind of taster, I think it will come as no surprise to most of us in the room, the kind of exponential growth in the number of connected devices. So the data here you can see at the top, growth in world population from around 2000 to 2020, 6.3 to 7.6 billion even. At the same time, the number of connected devices going from 500 million to 50 billion predicted. And so a ratio back in the 2000s of about 0.08 through to 6.6 connected devices per person. We've already passed that tipping point where there are as many connected devices as they are people. Stuff is changing, and the pace is exponential. Again, something here from Harvard Business Review blog a couple of months ago. It took 38 years for the radio to reach an audience of 50 million consumers, 13 years for television to do the same, 4 years for the internet, but only 2 years for the smartphone. And the comment here is it's daunting. It's daunting to keep current with such an influx marketplace, not to mention the myriad of consumer behavior changes that it drives. I think that final point is really important. This isn't just about the fact that it's a load of new devices and channels out there. The fact is, it is changing consumer behavior. It is changing what people expect, and that's happening. If it's me expecting the seamless experience across my different readers to consume my podcasts and news items or whatever. Okay, so the rate of change is increasing, and the breadth of impact is increasing. So not only is that pace changing, but the number of connected devices, the number of connected users is increasing as well. So that brings inevitably two things, both challenge and opportunity. Okay, so it's interesting. Historically, as end users, we've been required really to conform to the technology. So if you wanted to interact with digital things, you probably had to learn to type, even if you were just going to use 2 fingers. You maybe receive the information back via a very elegant green screen. Increasingly, the balance is shifting. So the advances in technology mean that we are really dictating terms in terms of how we choose to interact with the devices. So I don't know how many folks in the room have kids and also have tablet touchscreen technology and have seen the way that even a 2-year-old will grab a hold of that iPad and become extremely intrigued by the fact that, hey, you touch it and stuff moves, just like it does in the physical world. Now, my kids aren't quite old enough yet to be using mice, and I'm sure they see me use, actually I'm onto a trackpad now, but I'm sure they would see that and pick it up very quickly. But it's not quite the same thing as the direct manipulation of touch. And I think that what we are beginning to see is these very natural ways of interacting with devices through direct manipulation without specialist input, through voice, right? I don't know how many folks have always been intrigued by the possibility of dictation software. So I was definitely somebody in the late 90s and through the 2000s would kind of eagerly await the next publication of Dragon Dictate. Who has a copy of Dragon Dictate somewhere on a shelf? Okay, it's just me then. Me and Chad. Intrigued by the possibility that it offered of this idea that you could talk to the computer and it would understand it. And that was, kind of came hand in hand with the disappointment and sometimes the humor of what it actually thought you'd said. The intriguing thing now around, Siri, around, Google, it's not Talk, but whatever they call it, Google Voice, is actually the balance of the time, it gets it right. And I don't know how many people in the room have been through that experience of going, is it going to be awful again? Or I'll give it a go once and see how we go. And actually coming away and saying, wow, that's impressive. So with devices like Connect, the technology, the devices, they can see us. They recognize us. Those of you who are game heads in the room who would admit it, I'm one of them. It's fascinating. You go in, you switch on your Xbox, it logs you in because it recognizes who you are. Not only can it see where you're standing, what gestures you're making, it knows who you are, it knows where you are in the room. Interestingly, with this, it's opening up entire new markets. I think classically, Nintendo with the Wii, using something that was a gesture control. They actually went after a different market in comparison to the traditional video games console. So you were seeing these devices used socially, party games, groups of people interacting with the console, all gender, all age, gesture control, meaning that people could pick this up and get into it very, very quickly. They can see you, they can see what you're doing, you can use them to see, they can hear you and understand what you're saying. A lot of car manufacturers are now doing this. I think VW just announced the iBeetle, but BMW, Ford, all these organizations are exploring how to allow you in the context of your car to, again, interact with digital services using voice, gesture, all those type of things. The fuel band there, fascinating. How many of you are cyclists in the room? Kind of quite a few. Okay, how many of you have Strava accounts? Oh, quite a few too. Fascinating. So, we're now moving into a world where, people are tracking and logging their behaviors and they're sharing them socially. So, I have a Strava account, and I share my weekend rides, mostly to allow my mates to humiliate me through the kind of comments channel. But it's a new way of interacting. Again, combination of interesting devices. These devices know a lot about me when I go out on my bike. I'm one of these sort of sad individuals who has a little Bluetooth heart monitor. My cadence is recorded, my wheel speed is recorded. All that data gets uploaded onto Strava, pop it out there. So, you can see what my average heart rate was doing. All this personal data, along with my GPS, all out there. Fuel band doing different things. We are interacting in different ways with these devices. They are becoming ubiquitous and built into our lives in a very different way. So we talked about some of this. We talked about the devices. Cloud is a big enabling technology. We'll hear more about this, but if you think about it, where we've got lots of small distributed capabilities, and as an end user, I want this connectedness, somehow, something's got to be connecting all these things together. These guys have got to be exchanging information somehow. As an end user, I don't care, but there needs to be some enabling technology to support that. Clearly, cloud is a big part of that. Data. My colleague John Spencer is going to be talking a lot more about data later on. We have access now to all these behaviors. My heart rate data for the last year, if people are interested. What insights can we drive by having access to that information now it's out there and being shared? And of course, I mentioned in the context of, of Strava, being able to share things like your exercise history, goodness me, all the other stuff. I'm now having breakfast, I'm sitting having coffee. Who's used our one? Did we mention the hashtag for today? #TWLive. So at least Sam, clearly, because there's no other reason he would be holding his mobile phone during my presentation than that he is ecstatically tweeting away about the excellent kind of content. Come on to that social piece and the Twitter dimension there. All of organizations now recognize that kind of social value and have gone as far as to have a Facebook page, to have a Twitter account. And yet, interestingly, something from the US, top 100 US retail brands on Twitter, they don't respond to it. They're quite happy to broadcast that out as a channel, but they're not responding. A colleague of mine was on Southwest trains or similar, one of the commuting services in and out of London the other week, and the train came to a grinding halt. I'm sure the driver and the guard have some service level agreement, like they've got to come on the intercom within 2 minutes or something. Doesn't really guarantee whether they're going to give any information or not beyond the fact that the train stopped and they'll let you know. And this was the situation. So my colleague was on there, tweeted to Southwest Trains or whoever it was, just saying, hey, what's going on? Other people were on the mobile phoning up Southwest. The best communication channel that she had was via Twitter. So, props to Southwest. They were communicating back, explaining the issue. The guys in the train had more information via Twitter than the guard and the driver did, who were presumably on some kind of radio device to the signal station. It's interesting. It's a changing world. So, new technology is creating these new challenges, but uncertainty reigns. So we have our truckload of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, our FUD factor here. Questions that are out there, like the segue. Are users going to adopt this technology? What is the commercial model? Is it freemium? What are we going to do? Which bet should we place in terms of the technology? So as organizations in this changing environment, we're exploring unknown terrain. So what's our strategy? Is our strategy to have big brains and go into a darkened room and take a bunch of time and look into our crystal ball and predict the future? Well, you guys are welcome to go and try that strategy if you like, but I would suggest it's unlikely to be effective for you because maybe there are one or two people who've been lucky, and let's face it, if you get enough people predicting the future, somebody's going to get it right. But I think as an organization, it's a very, very dangerous strategy to take. A better one is to say, okay, we exist in this environment, therefore how do we respond? We accept that this is a bit trite. We embrace the fact that the only thing that's constant is change, and then we think about how we create an organization that can work with that. So let's talk briefly about that. Okay, left-hand side, concept, bottom right-hand side, cash. How do we get from having business ideas, stuff that we think is going to be exciting and compelling to our end users, and getting it in their hands? So I admit a little bit waterfall for an agile organization, not my slide. So we've clearly, there's a big loopy circle around the edge to demonstrate it's iterative, okay? Clearly we've got to think, we've got to have ideas, but we can't spend too much time on this. And John Crosby with us today from Travelocity Last Minute, and Barry O'Reilly, one of our own, will be talking about this process of rapidly validating and getting ideas out to market in very short periods of time. You need in the core there, if you're developing software solutions, you need the technical discipline and that predictable core. And Martin and Giles are going to be talking a lot about the combination of what experience do you want to create and what is the platform that's going to support you. So we're going to be talking a lot more about that core component. And you need to put it together in this kind of iterative cycle. And you need to be taking it back to the key folks. You need to be taking it to the end users as quickly as you can to validate whether what you're coming up with makes sense to them. At the same time, I'd argue you need to have a vision. Okay? You can't simply be entirely crowdsourcing your solution. Sort of Bill Clinton crowdsourcing his policies in the mid-90s, or the Blair government doing similar. You need to have vision mixed in that. Chad is going to be talking later on today about the challenges of product management. You need your cross-discipline team. You need your stakeholders. You need to look at your competitive landscape. Clearly you do. You need to get that stuff out there as quickly as you can. Things like guerrilla usability testing, whether it's paper prototypes, lightweight frameworks that allow you to kind of capture that richer experience that you might deliver on a particular device or cross-device early to get feedback. Ultimately, the rubber really begins to hit the road when you're able to put this in front of significant numbers of users. And that's where best use of analytics, big data, ultimately customer insight. Let's look at statistically valid volumes of behavior and understand what people are actually doing and how we can evolve our proposition in association with that. And of course, we're talking today about that challenge of doing that where the future is fragmented and you want to give a consistent, coherent experience across these multiple devices. Okay, so just something to throw out there, which no particular answers around this. It is a theme that the speaker is going to touch on today, is around, there's a dilemma, there's a challenge here as an organization. There's this tension between exploring new, exciting product and service ideas and capitalizing, maintaining, evolving existing established product. If you're all greenfield, for a while, life is good because you haven't got any legacy to deal with. You can go and embrace the latest technology. You can make sure you've got that, the Google Glasses integration, or again, for the gamers amongst you, make sure you're kind of supporting Oculus Rift for your new immersive 3D environments. Great, so you're really in that kind of responsive end of the world where it's all about flexibility, adaptation, these tight feedback loops. Okay, well, there's another world, right, where you've got existing product. You've got hundreds, thousands of customers on your existing products and services who expect a certain thing and may not have the tolerance for change that you would like them to have. Maybe you don't really understand how exciting your product roadmap is. And they need to be supported and cared for and taken on that journey as well. And there's a tension between these two worlds. And Richard from Morrison's and Mark will be talking about this kind of tension and how you move along that again later on in the day. This is something that interests us very much. As I say, I don't have any particular answers. I'll take one look at it in a moment. But it's something we face ourselves through ThoughtWorks Studios. So Chad, who will be talking about our products, is the managing director of Studios, which produce Mingle and Go and Twist, which are products, and we have new products in the pipeline. So this is something that we know intimately from our own experience as well as working with clients. Okay, so we like to focus on the responsive side because that's kind of interesting and intriguing. And you see lots of great words up, like explore, innovate, kind of create. So I was talking with a colleague of mine who works closely with folks at IDEO on the West Coast, IDEO being a very well-known design and innovation consultancy. Just this kind of, what is innovation? This kind of good old question, and I'm not going to try and answer that because there are as many views of that as there are articles or presentations written on it. But there was an interesting thing that he talked to me about that I wanted to share. And he talked about, in some ways, innovation is about a combination of unexpected ideas, putting together things in a new way or seeing them in a new light. And the conversation he was having with our friends from IDEO was, it's interesting that actually in many ways that's the same kind of definition of kind of comedy. You juxtapose unexpected ideas and you kind of have a reveal that's kind of intriguing and engaging. And this kind of opens up this kind of whole question. We talked about that tension between maintaining evolving existing products, having ideas about new ones. How does that go side by side? And one of the challenges we have as leaders, as people who are creating context in organizations for people to do that is what type of environment breeds this sense of creativity and so on and so forth. At some level it's cheesy, create a kind of a culture of fun. There's actually some hard research that's been done about the way in which environment impacts people's ability to innovate. So some fascinating research has been done, guys like Don Norman who've been around in this type of space for a long time. But basically it comes back to fight or flight. We're still engineered that if you put us in a threat situation, the blood comes up, the adrenaline pumps. We do a very short analysis of the various options available to us. We pick one based on gut, and then that's all we focus on. Tunnel vision, boom. In contrast to that, people think creatively when they're in the context of trust and security. That's not about lack of challenge. Doesn't mean that you can't have challenge in your teams and robust discussion. I don't know if any of you have come across, I always get this guy's name wrong. Frank Lencioni, 5 Dysfunctions of Team. Anybody familiar with his stuff? Yeah, 1 or 2. Fascinating. He talks about how do you create great teams. And his base level is trust. And his next level is about vulnerability and robust dissension counterpoints of view. If you don't create that safe environment, that sense of trust, you are going to really struggle to drive innovation because people will simply focus on one result, the first solution they get, tunnel vision, off they go. There's a huge amount for us as an industry and organizations and thinking about how we structure, I think, to do things around this. Lots more there, but I'm down to about 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute. So some stuff that you can do is you need to think about this. Some organizations build a lifeboat. They actually kind of create an area where there's a different set of rules. Freedom of process, freedom of infrastructure. Interestingly, I'm not really talking about skunk works here. I'm not talking about stuff that's happening under the covers. There wasn't really time to go into it. But here, there's a point about don't sweat the consistency. As a leadership team, if in that role, you're trying to set stuff up, you want consistency. I want everybody to be doing the same thing across my organization because then it's predictable and I feel like I'm in control. How far down the ladder of implementation are you going to require your teams to be specific? Or to what degree are you going to say, let culture be our glue? Let's establish our culture, let's establish our values, and then let's go and trust those individuals to do the right thing. It's hard, believe me. It's something that in my role in ThoughtWorks, I come up time and time again. but then you're not doing something in an unmeasured way. And maybe the stuff that you learn by taking this approach you can bring back into the wider picture. So the question to us, what sort of future are we creating? If we're going to be shaping this future, if there is such uncertainty, if we're capable of creating adaptive and responsible organizations in this digital space, actually that's a really powerful thing. And as ThoughtWorks, we'd argue it's beyond just what that means for us kind of commercially. How can we unlock that, not just for commercial good, but further than that? So later on today, Jeff and Daniel are going to be talking about some of the work that we've been doing mutually with CamFed, Campaign for Female Education in Sub-Saharan Africa, which is taking some of these technologies and saying, well, how can you unlock that for that group of individuals who are on the wrong side of the digital divide? Using feature phones to gather information about the effectiveness of what they're doing in the campaign. Using feature phones to create a social network. Not the richness that you've got on a smartphone or other devices, but how can you do that on a feature phone, on what for us feels like quite old style stuff. So, there are issues around privacy. We joked about that. We touched on it with Google Glasses. There are issues around what this means for freedom of information and open access. There are issues around the environmental impact of all the things we do. So it's interesting, and I hope we're going to have great debate today around that stuff. We know that you folks in the room, you have ambitious missions, and we believe that ambitious missions need disruptive thinking. So hopefully we're going to have some of that today. So just in closing, just another kind of recap on what we're going to be seeing today.